Hello, class, and welcome to your reading review lecture of Miss G, A Case of Internet Addiction, and the essay SLUT. Both of these are examples of extended definitions, right? Normally, we think of an addiction as a bad thing, as a negative. This essay redefines it to make the point that Miss G, her addiction, isn't actually a negative thing, and as the writer says, this kind of internet use isn't usually described as an addiction, even if there's some shirking of chores and insomnia to it. The internet, as Gabrielle uses it, simply is intellectual life and play. She's just the person I'd want for a student, in fact, or a friend or a daughter. It's no accident that search is the dominant metaphor of the internet. So again, according to the definition of addiction, right, based on that internet survey by Dr. Young that she mentions in the introduction, Gabrielle fulfills the criteria for addiction. But by redefining the term to show that it's actually not necessarily a bad thing, this essay takes a term that's abstract, addiction, and redefines it as something that could be a positive, because normally we think of it as a negative. Now, for your essay 3, you need to bring in fictional sources. So, again, this essay does a nice job of extending the definition with a real life example, but make sure that if you're uh, writing about addiction, could you bring in Miss G as a source? Yes, if you were writing about internet addiction, but keep in mind that the focus of your essay needs to be fiction. So maybe you get a poem or multiple poems about addiction, or a short story about addiction, um, or a play about addiction. And for this, if you were to use the Miss G as a source, you would have to be writing about fiction, right? Fictional sources that are examples of internet addiction, and then you could bring in the Miss G essay um, as a source. Um, Again, this isn't a chemical addiction, right? What they're suggesting is that it's more of a psychological addiction. We all agree on what a chemical addiction is, but it gets abstract when we think about psychological or emotional addictions. So notice how that essay goes beyond the traditional definition of the term. Now, the next essay, SLUT, um, also goes beyond the traditional dictionary definition, because normally, right, it's a negative. And I think the first paragraph is very important when it brings up the idea that the word has shifted into ambiguous territory. Ambiguous means unclear, right? In paragraph 1, it can still be an insult, especially since there is no pejorative, that means negative, equivalent to suggest that a man has sullied himself with too many sexual partners. Um, that's a really good point. When you think about it, a lot of times if you want to refer to a man as overly promiscuous, you take a normally female word and put man before it, right? Man whore, right? Or something like that. They're really, when you think of like player and stud, player kind of has a positive connotation. It means someone's good at playing a game, and the game is obviously relationships. Um, and stud comes from the derivation from horses. If a racehorse has such good qualities, they use it as a verb. They stud the horse out, meaning the horse breeds with as many female horses as possible to try to recreate uh, that genealogy. So when you say someone's a stud, it means that their physical characteristics are so desirable that people want to breed with them, right? It's an allusion to horses. So again, stud and player necessarily, although in context could be negative, they're rooted in something that's not pejorative. So um, I think this is a very interesting essay when we think about if you wanted to look at female identity for essay number 3 and look at how certain female characters um, cannot have power as women, or do not have the same social expectations, and in this case with regard to relationships. I mean, I think Ophelia would be an excellent source for identity in SA3 if you wanted to look at female promiscuity. Think about it. Her brother and her father both tell her bad things will happen if you sleep with Hamlet. Right? Now, so there's that double standard where if Ophelia sleeps with Hamlet and he doesn't marry her, that's going to be a problem. Whereas that same standard doesn't apply for Hamlet, doesn't apply for men. If you want to look at promiscuity and female identity, right, you have that short story in Reading and Writing About Literature called Girl, where the older female narrator, speaker, seems to be giving the girl, the listener in the story, advice on avoiding being an SLUT. She repeats that word multiple times. Um, Lastly, for those of you that are familiar with Othello, uh, Desdemona and Emilia, towards the end of the play, have a very interesting conversation about whether or not a woman would ever cheat on her husband. And again, those double standards and those stereotypes are prevalent in that conversation as well. You look at Lady Macbeth, and she has to unsex herself so that she can have power. Why can't she be a female and have power? Why, right? She says, "Fill me to the crown, to the toe, top full of direst cruelty." Right? She literally says, "Come to my women's breasts and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers." I mean, it doesn't get any more specific there than replacing her breast milk, which is a symbol of femininity and nurturing a child, right? Replacing it with poison, right? But after she unsexes herself, she is able to manipulate and control Macbeth, and she is able to be cruel and not feel remorse, right? She says, "Stop up the access of remorse." So again, or I'm sorry, stop up the, I think she says passage or access. But the bottom line is she asks the murdering ministers to unsex her so she can be cruel and she won't feel guilt or remorse. So it's very interesting when we look at identity in relation to the essay SLUT and thinking about female promiscuity as a whole. So hopefully this lecture is helpful in understanding the two essays and how they're working as extended definitions and how you can use these essays to help you better understand what you need to be doing for essay 3. So thank you for your attention and your patience, and please make sure to give me a call or message me. Let me know if you have any questions about Essay 3, extended definition, right? You're taking a term, right, and going beyond the dictionary definition to extend it in an analysis of how the term is abstract, to make a point, to extend that definition beyond the traditional one. So let me know if you have any questions, and I hope this video was helpful. Thank you.